If you are interested in exploring these topics further, learning and connecting with like-minded individuals, check out the 3 Patreon discussion groups available. Just visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com and click the participate button. I also offer a free meditation group online every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to any of my social media profiles for the link found in my link tree. There's no pressure to be on camera or to actively participate in any of these groups. Just come and listen and enjoy. Join an online spiritual community of everyday people committed to understanding the human experience more deeply through spiritual practices that we can apply to our everyday lives. Join us. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today I'm going to pull on a thread that runs all the way back to ancient Babylon and stretches deep into our modern banking system. This thread is also connected to my own sanity, so we'll see how that goes. Now, what we do in all of these episodes is that we zoom into a topic, look at it closely, and then zoom out to see how it affects us spiritually and how it affects our everyday lives. Well, believe it or not, this topic is no different. So, if you're back, congratulations. Look, I make a lot of jokes about becoming difficult at parties, but I promise you, this one's a doozy. The topic is the Babylonian financial system of control. This one may send you down a rabbit hole you can't get out of. I'm not going to lie to you. And like previous episodes, it comes with some very intense side effects, which may include eye rolling, sighing, an inability to focus during mundane conversation, inappropriate chuckling during discussions of current events. But I promise you, you can learn to smile and nod and play along. So before we get into our topic, I would like to take a moment to respond to a few YouTube comments. First off, the individual that believes that my message would be more effective if I didn't use such crude language. Look, I use crude language because I have a small vocabulary due to a very low IQ, and for that, I would like to thank the teachers' unions, the Palm Beach County public school system, and just a little backstory on the origin of my ignorance. Every semester of high school, I would ask to take an algebra class. And every semester, I would be told that it would be futile because I would just fail it. This kept me in what was known as business math at the time. In business math, we focused on learning to write checks and count change. I did that for 4 years. I guess they figured that I would just be working behind a cash register most of my life. So again, thank you for believing in me and making an effort to challenge me. That was great. And I'm sure that if I'd only lived in the Northeast, that wouldn't have happened because everyone up there is a genius and they definitely haven't filled their own bed with so much shit that they need to pack up their belongings and move to South Florida, only to complain about all of the bad drivers, which are in fact transplanted Northeasterners and island people. So which is it? Are you noticing that you guys are actually bad at driving, or are you being a racist by complaining about the cultural differences in driving techniques possessed by our fine Caribbean transplants? Which is it? You have to pick one. Second, it was explained to me in reference to one of my episodes on the phenomenon that proclaiming that Jesus Christ is Lord would then repel the phenomenon as it was is in fact satanic. Satanic was in quotation marks, which is very strange, especially in context. I was then told that it was a fact, that was a fact, and that I should look it up. However, I was not told where to look it up. So that was very helpful. By the way, sir, The etymology of the word Satan comes from the Hebrew word shaitan, which means adversary or accuser. And right now, your comment feels very adversarial and accusatory. So who's being satanic now? And Jesus Christ is Lord. Let's see if that gets rid of you. So I'm going to begin my undereducated and spiritually misled talk about the Babylonian financial system of control, which incidentally was not part of my business mathematics class for all 4 years of high school. Now, this topic, it's something I've wanted to do for a very long time, but I wasn't really sure where to go with it. Quite frankly, I'm still not sure, but the reality of becoming awake, the reality of waking up to our spiritual truth is that it leads us to looking at all of these other things, politics, consumerism, money, etc. We begin to learn truly that we are in fact in the world, but not of the world. However, that little in the world part needs to contend with the world. It has no choice. So through this process of becoming awake, we start to realize certain things. And one of the things we realize is that we've been had. We've been fooled. Or not fooled, but let's just say that our own biological imperatives, our own evolutionary psychology has been used against us. It has been used, often weaponized against us for the benefit of various classes so that they may have the luxury of living seasonally in some urban hellscape in the Northeast and then descend like locusts upon another. These are some of the most unremarkable and soft-bellied individuals that our earth has to offer. But I digress. So I'm what the kids would call an old head when it comes to conspiracies. I'm an old school conspiracy guy from way back when. I was steeped in it from a very early age, thanks to my father. I was raised on Ruby Ridge, so to speak. And I'll let you look that one up on your own, as I'm positive I will have my account shut down if I go into too much detail here. That's no joke. If the Ruby Ridge incident doesn't result in anger, then you might want to drive yourself to an emergency room now, because you might actually have no heart in your chest, or your brain is in backwards, which seems like a serious thing. So go get. Now, one of the best things that came out of the COVID years was that it resulted in an apocalypse for a lot of you. It parted the veil and you saw with a capital S, and you dove headfirst into conspiracy land. But unfortunately, you dove in when the misinformation machine of the legacy media was really revved up and really kind of compromising sources. These sources didn't know that they were compromised, of course, but they are. So if you're new to this world, welcome. And here's your first reading assignment. Behold a Pale Horse by Milton William Cooper. Bill Cooper was a wild boy, and like many, he was very complicated, and like many, seemed crazy and unhinged at the time. But then you look back and you think, holy shit, that crazy fucker was right. Either way, Bill Cooper needs to be the starting point, trust me. Just a disclaimer, the views expressed by Bill Cooper or any other conspiracy theorist recommended by the host of the Infinite Spark of Being podcast do not reflect the thoughts and opinions of the host of the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. Okay, so let's get into it. So there's a saying or an idea or concept that says money is Babylonian. Some of you may or may not have heard that before, but it pops up in esoteric circles, conspiracy theory land, and even in discussions about religion and global economics, actually. But where does that idea actually come from? Well, there's this notion that what we call money today, our entire financial system, is rooted in something much older than we can imagine. It's older than Wall Street, older than the Federal Reserve, older than Jekyll Island, that it's not just about economics, but about control, about a system that was designed to keep people bound to debt. It's a heavy topic, but it's one that's really important because it impacts all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. My journey into this whole idea began in 2008 because, like you, I was just minding my own business when all hell broke loose. So in this episode, we're going to dig into it. how Babylon gave birth to debt, credit, and interest, the concept of Babylonian money magic, what it really means and where does it come from, the connection between ancient financial systems and modern banking, and whether or not we're living in a kind of economic slavery today. And look, this isn't about pushing a narrative, right? Says every person pushing a narrative, but it's about exploring history, spirituality, and these weird forces that we don't really think of that attempt to shape our reality. And look, I obviously have my opinions, but I want you to know this. As some of these topics become more social or political, the topics of this podcast, just know this. I am a trickster. And some of you may find that spooky or off-putting as some sort of declaration of Luciferianism. If that is the case, then you obviously don't have the stomach for any of this, and you should go back out into the world, eat a donut, watch Friends reruns, and don't you ever, ever, ever dare to question a single thing in your life and wait for someone to come along and tell you what your next opinion is. Now, if you are here for the ride, just know that I am chaotic good. I have been known to take an opposing view just for the fun of it, ask questions even when I agree, and I am by no means attached to my opinions. So let's start with the basics. Ancient Babylon, about 4,000 years ago, was one of the first places in human history where we saw a structured financial system. And well, that just sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, what's a society without a structured financial system, right? Now we're not talking about paper money, beads, furs, digital transaction, or shit coins, bitcoins, meme coins, or doge coins, but something much more fundamental, something much darker. We're talking about debt. We're talking about loans and interest. You see, Babylon had something called temple banking, where priests acted as the first financiers. And if you don't know what that means, let me say it like this. Priests were running the fucking banks. So farmers, merchants, and even the upper ruling class could take out loans. Isn't that awesome? The fucking assholes in charge, the ruling class, was in debt to the fucking priests. Do you see the problem here? Everyone, yes, everyone, every person, from the lowly farmer to the big fat king and queen, owed these assholes money. This is where it starts, folks. The supposed pipeline to God, the church, the temple, was loaning money to people. And not just regular folks, right? Not just the fucking farmers, but remember, the ruling class. Now, and this is the key, those loans weren't charity. The temple wasn't just trying to help. They came with interest. The priests were charging interest. This is where we start to see this early formation of economic control, because debt is a powerful thing. Once you owe, you're owned in a way. Once you owe, you're owned, right? So is that a chip on my shoulder that you see? Absolutely not. It's just the truth. This is the way it is. You create control. So next time you check your credit score and you get excited about that number, just remember where it started. Our little bubble of life here in the West is fed by that score. So this all can sound a bit infuriating, but have no fear. The Code of Hammurabi is here. This is one of the oldest legal texts in existence, and it laid down the rules about debt and interest, and thank God. It even had regulations on how much interest to charge. And from the very beginning, people recognized, they're very sensible people, that unchecked lending and borrowing could lead, maybe in a far off universe, it could lead to exploitation. And we don't want that, do we? Now, before I get into this next part, let me say this. If you're sitting there minding your own business and I say something really mean to you, something that really pisses you off, and you jump up and you run at me and you start yelling back at me, you fell under my spell. I uttered an incantation that animated you. I destroyed your peace. I just casted a spell on you. You fell under my control. The sounds coming out of my mouth caused a sensation in your nervous system that then animated your body and disturbed your mind. I used magic to control you. Never forget, magic isn't about flying around on a broomstick or Harry Potter. In the previous example, the one I just spoke about, I spoke an incantation and you fell under my control. You turn on the media or any other sort of thing, whether it's news, fashion, entertainment, whatever, and you begin to believe what they say. You buy what they tell you to buy, and you believe what they tell you to believe. You see the world that they told you to see. Now you're under their spell. I have a Substack about that. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but go subscribe to my Substack. So depending on the path, whether dark or light, it's about control. A darker path attempts to control others. In the lighter path, you learn to control yourself. And that brings us to the idea of Babylonian money magic. Babylonian money magic is a way to control. So how is it that I can say those words with a straight face? Babylonian money magic. Often when I say them, the other person does not keep a straight face, but you'll see. And, depending on what circles you've been around, what rabbit holes you've gone down, you've heard the term Babylonian money magic thrown around, especially in alternative history, conspiracy theories, esoteric circles, on a Saturday. But what does it actually mean? What are these people like me, these uneducated dummies talking about? I mean, if Babylonian money magic was a thing and it was actually a control system, wouldn't we know about it? I mean, wouldn't we have heard something about this? I mean, we hear about everything that's dangerous, right? Well, the idea here is that money, especially debt-based currency. Let me say that again. Remember how currency used to be based on gold, yada, yada. Well, now it's debt-based currency is more than just this medium for exchange. It's a tool of control. The theory goes that Babylonian priesthood or some other ancient ruling class figured out a system where they could enslave people through debt rather than force. So think about it. If you conquer someone with an army, they're going to resist you. You will be fighting forever, okay? No, you won't. You eventually win. They realize you're superior. They give up fighting and accept your presence. That's how you spread democracy. It doesn't lead to forever wars that ensure a continuous stream of cash that fills the pockets of the shareholders at Halliburton, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, you stupid conspiracy theorist. But what if you create a system where people willingly enter into debt in order to acquire goods that to a certain extent are required to live a comfortable human existence in modern society? Well, they'll be bound by their own agreements, won't they? Now, being trapped in this system is bad enough for regular folks, right? With regular jobs. But it gets worse. What about the people working for, I don't know, let's say a weapons manufacturer, or a politician, or folks that actually work in the institutions themselves that prop up the system? Well, they're trapped too, right? They're also in this circle. So the weapons manufacturer, the banks, the politicians, they need to pay their bills too. They need to sustain the lifestyle that they're accustomed to. So what does that mean? That means they need to remain relevant. Supply and demand. They need someone to buy what they're selling, or worse, They need someone to need what they're selling. So the weapons manufacturer needs someone to really need their weapons, and the politicians need someone to need their leadership, and the bank needs someone to need their loans. They're all trapped in the system as well. I realize that this is a bit of a digression, but I'm just trying to make a point about how nefarious this all gets. Go back to episode 192 on egregores. If we take the weapons manufacturer, for instance, the egregore controlling that isn't necessarily war. What about the desire for sustainable comfort and the greed that keeps those individuals working for the manufacturer in a cycle of credit and loans in their personal life that then urges them to go to work and build a faster rocket with a more accurate guidance system? This is just stuff to think about here, right? Like I'm just saying. And before I start to sound like some kind of childish, idealistic hippie, I understand that the need for weaponry. And for those of you that don't, or try to use a spiritual bypass to avoid thinking about the need for it, read your Vedas. War is necessary sometimes. I also understand that there's a need for a monetary system, but I also understand that there's a lot of shit that comes with both of those things, right? Because the human incarnation is complicated, to say the least. And on some level, I think these dark energies, these dark beings, satanic forces, demonic whatevers, are all just part of the human realm as well. I don't believe we ever rid the world of them, but I do believe, I think we need to be aware of them and learn to navigate the world where they do exist. I mean, we've all had or have loans. It's just part of it. But we should also know where these things come from. It's like this, right? We know that dissatisfaction is inherent in form in the human body. And we know that grasping and clinging is the root of that dissatisfaction. But to know that and realizing that doesn't necessarily remove them from our lives altogether, but it definitely makes us aware, and it allows us to mitigate some of the suffering that comes from dissatisfaction. So let's get back on track. I'm sorry. This episode's going to be like this. So this whole thing gets even more interesting, as if it could, when we look at modern banking. It's the way these central banks create money, the role of interest rates, inflation. These things function in a way that some believe mirrors, some, not me, mirrors the ancient Babylonian model. When money is created as debt, when the entire system relies on keeping people in a state of owing, it starts to sound like a very old playbook being used in a very modern world. Just notice the emphasis made on interest rates when it comes to how well the economy's doing, right? Is the economy doing well if everyone needs to get loans? I mean, sure, if the economy is based on debts and loans, I mean, is everyone thriving when folks need to take out loans to pay for a new roof when the old roof is perfectly fine? But the insurance companies decide that since some people lost their roof, everyone in the entire fucking state needs a new roof. And not to be too specific, I think this is interesting and you can translate it however, but here's what's happening in the state of Florida. The people on the west coast of the state, God bless them, have homes that sit on a tepid bathtub of oil leakage and runoff that is a magnet for hurricanes due to its placement on the planet. Yes, the East Coast has been hit, but not like the West Coast. Because on the East Coast, we have water that doesn't act like a charging station for hurricanes. We also have the Caribbean that slows them down and takes the beating. God bless all of you down there. And yes, Andrew happened, but again, that's 2 counties away from me. And was it a bit of an anomaly when it happened in the 90s? Yes. So now we all need new roofs, and unless you've just got it like that, that requires a loan, right? And why not split it up by county? I'll tell you, because the insurance companies are here to help, right? And they just want what's best for us all. And quite frankly, they are reptilian statisticians that understand more about risk management than us lowly humans. So on that note, go to theinfinitesparkofbeing.com and get yourself a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or a hat. Hell, buy 3 or 4. So why is the insurance company doing this? To make more money and increase shareholder value. The insurance companies and the builders get together and hatch this fucking scheme that approach the lawmakers. Then the lawmakers do their thing. Now it's a law. They all need to remain relevant in order to make money that pays for their shit because they have loans as well. This is an economy based on loans, interest rates, debt, and control. This is a demonic system. I don't think I throw that around that often, but it is. This is black magic. Trauma responses, anxiety, ruminating thinking, grief and loss, stress, these are all reoccurring patterns in the mind. They're often the result of reacting the same way over and over again. Why do we do this? Because the mind believes the past is still here, happening now, causing the nervous system to respond accordingly. What the mind perceives, the body feels. Mind Transformation and Restructuring, MTR, offers a pathway to release these patterns. It guides both the mind and the nervous system out of these repetitive cycles and into a lighter, freer way of being. If this resonates with you, feel free to reach out via direct message or through the contact section at theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. You don't have to live the way you've been living. Change is possible. And we'll get into more in a minute, but this is dark sigil magic being used against you. And while we're here, let me toss this one out there too. Points on your credit card. If you spend enough on your credit card, you get to shop more. So if you go far enough into debt, you can then buy a few bags of groceries and a couple tanks of gas. Isn't that fucking wonderful? That's definitely not a carrot and a stick situation at all. I mean, they're definitely not incentivizing you to go into debt. They're here to help you, try to help you live, damn it. Okay, so let's go even deeper because this isn't just about economics. It's about psychology. It's about energy. It's about intention. You know, the stuff we always think about when it comes to money, right? So back to this temple banking thing. These temple banks were the spiritual origins of financial and economic control. I want to repeat that. The spiritual origins of financial and economic control, which always rubs us Americans, the wrong way with our mega churches and our jet-setting pastors. I mean, I'm sure other places have it too, but I feel like we've really excelled in the space of beady-eyed, money-grubbing spiritual leaders, right, Mr. Olstein? So these ancient temples weren't just places of worship. They were also the first financial institutions. In Babylon and other really early civilizations like Sumer and Egypt, temples served as banks. They were treasuries, and they were the center of commerce. This wasn't just about collecting donations or tithes. Temples actively controlled the wealth. They issued the loans and managed their large-scale economic transactions, just the way God wanted it. But why temples, right? Because people trusted them. In societies where gods were seen as the ultimate authority, a temple was the most stable and legitimate institution to safeguard wealth and I get that if the priests are incorruptible, but, right? And honestly, something else that might be worth pointing out here, lest we become too cynical, is that when you have a lineage, right? And there's a lineage head or a guru or whatever, and that person dies, there's a bit of a spiritual power vacuum. This happens a lot. I think Buddhism tries to address it with this idea of the tulku or reincarnated leader. But for the most part, there's usually someone who was a disciple that was close to the OG, to the head, and they usually take over. The Hare Krishnas had a famous Kirtanananda, who was an absolute psychopath pervert that tried to derail the Hare Krishna movement. But, they usually take over. After that, we've all heard the stories, like I just mentioned, but I wonder if, what if going back that far, right, to ancient Sumer, Egypt, Babylon, the temple leaders or the race of beings, that's right, race of beings that started religion itself, maybe they were incorruptible, right? What if as humans, what if we as humans are the race that slipped into the power vacuum thinking, yeah, we'll just do it like Gorlock from Beetlejuice told us to do it, right? But then we said, if we're going to loan out all this money, we should be compensated for it, right? So fuck it, let's charge some interest. I don't know. It's just a thought. What if, there is the rumor that religion is created by our alien overlords. Anyway, so, it's interesting, right? We want to put spiritual leaders on a pedestal. We want to look up to them. But when they do something truly sideways, right, we think, fuck, I would have never done that. And we think that, but who knows? It reminds me of this saying in Buddhism, always live 5 mountain ranges away from your teacher. And why is that? Because one day they will do something very fucking human. I don't think it's about hiding from students, but you have to remember the spiritual path, it's about internal belief. It's about feeling. The spiritual leader, priest, whatever, they're like a statue or an idol or even a rosary or whatever. They are simply a symbol that has been imbued with your belief. The thing that propels us up the mountain successfully isn't the idol, the building, or the person. It's our belief in the meaning that we've given them, or it, whatever. So yes, keep your teachers at arm's length. It's not them that's so powerful. It's you. It's your belief that is driving you. Now, back to temples. At the time, these temples, they held grain, gold, silver. They facilitated trade. And this is where it gets interesting. And this is what I was just talking about. They loaned money with interest. This is where the idea of debt as a form of control begins to emerge. And this was part of the spell that put people into the control of an institution, right? So in Babylon, temple banking evolved into a structured financial system that closely resembles what we see today, right? The temples stored wealth for the rulers and the merchants, similar to modern banking vaults, issued loans to individuals and businesses, just like lending institutions, changed interest on loans, making it profitable for the temple itself, and finally controlled land and resources through financial transaction. And here's the rub. When people couldn't pay back their debts, they often had to sell themselves or their family members into servitude. This is one of the earliest recorded forms of debt slavery, where financial obligation turned into lifelong bondage. Think about that for a second. If you couldn't pay your temple debt, you might have to work for the temple. Essentially, you'd become part of the priesthood's labor force. And today, people might not be physically enslaved over debt, but they are definitely trapped in a cycle of repayment, whether it's student loans, mortgages, credit cards. And as trite as it might sound, we have replaced the temple with the bank. Same system, different era. And I realize that I sound crazy, and maybe none of this is adding up, so thank you for bearing with me as I sound like a bit of a kook. I mean, the next thing you know, I'll start talking about how COVID was the result of a lab leak, and that it didn't simply start because a pangolin ate a bat that ate the rat that lived in the house that Fauci built. So how does this tie into the idea, and it's just an idea, that modern banking or modern money is Babylonian? Well, 1, centralized economic control, just like temples in ancient Babylonia, right, that control the financial transactions. Modern central banks dictate economic policies. Whether it's the Federal Reserve, the IMF, or the global financial institutions, money is still controlled from the top down. Number 2, debt is a tool of enslavement. Ancient temple loans often resulted in lifelong servitude. Today, the average American is expected to take on debt just to fucking survive, whether it's a mortgage, student loans, or credit card interest. What's the difference? Well, now we call it credit worthiness. See? Now you're worthy of the goods and services required to live in a modern society that expands and changes in a way that you have no say over, though, right? So congratulations, right? And number 3, the religious connection. In Babylon, money was tied to the gods. Today, money itself is treated like a fucking god. People worship wealth. They worship these demigods of social media hustle culture, these jackwagons that are going to sell you a 90-day course on God knows what, but it earns you money while you sleep. And it will allow you to drive a rented McLaren, just like the soft-bellied fuckboy on the Instagram post, right? Pursue it at all costs and live in the fear of financial ruin. The structure of belief hasn't changed. It's the same. It's just looking at something else. It's just shifted its focus. Now, number 4, occult aspects. Sorry. If we take the sigil magic perspective, right? Modern currency is imbued with symbolic power. The temple priests controlled economic transactions through divine authority. Today, central banks and financial institutions use symbolism, secrecy, and structured belief systems to maintain economic dominance. You don't even know the symbols are working, right? The colors of the branding, green and blue, the shapes of the symbols and the money. Think about it. If you see a rectangle, right, with a circle in each corner and oval in the middle, you think of money. It's like what we saw in cartoons. Like they would just insinuate that it was money with just shapes or even a dollar sign, right? I mean, it's not all black magic, but it's symbols that our nervous system respond to. And the secrets, well, have you ever asked one of these fucking bank employees to explain the monetary system, like how it works? Well, I'll tell you what, I have, because when I get frustrated, I don't just sit there in that stupid little chair on the other side of that fucking table, just nodding my head. I push. And you know why? Because there's a moment when they believe they're over you. They have put themselves on a pedestal, and sometimes we have to kick the fucking thing out from under them. We got to watch their eyes glaze over when you say, "What do you mean?" Right? They say something to you, go, what do you mean? I just play dumb and start asking questions. And eventually, right, when we've got them when I've got them in a wonderful little circle, I usually lean in and say, "Hey, we both know this is fucking stupid, right?" And they usually just laugh and we move on. You see, I want them to think about that conversation at dinner. I want them to realize that while at one point money was real, it's now an imaginary point system. And they use it to control the populace. Once you realize that a branch manager and all of these unremarkable blazer-wearing drones are just the caretakers for these arbitrary numbers, this invisible points system, right? And that they really don't understand it, you feel a little more free. At least I do, right? Remember, it's not a bank. It's a coven. So a witch's coven. I realize, as I'm doing this, I realized I may have brought up something that I assumed you all understood. I'm sorry. I'm actually working on that. Christy says that I just start talking about some wild shit without explaining it. I forget that while I was being a dork and screaming about how we're all under the control of this magical system that's associated with this new religion, you were all probably just living lives of normal people. So there's this concept in occult practices called sigil magic. I've talked about it in other episodes. Now, if you're not familiar, a sigil is a tool, a symbol. It's a tool, but we'll call it a symbol, right? And it's created to represent an intention. And in something called chaos magic and other esoteric traditions, people use sigils to focus their energy towards a specific outcome. You create a symbol, charge it with belief, and let it do its work in the subconscious. I've touched on it. I wish I could remember the episode number, but anyway, if you purchase any of my books or have seen me in person, you've seen sigils associated with the infinite spark of being. So now here's where it gets scary. What happens when this simple sigil principle is applied on a mass scale? Think about corporate logos, national currency, even the very shape, the design of the money itself. These are all symbols that have been charged with meaning and belief. When we see the dollar sign, it's not just ink on paper. We feel something. It represents power, value, even survival. And because we all collectively believe in it, it seems real. That's the essence of sigil magic, a symbol gaining power through collective belief. Crosses, swastikas, fucking name it. And to refer back to episode 192 again, maybe it becomes an egregore. Now, apply that to money and the financial systems. What if the most powerful sigils in the world aren't hidden in these old grimoires, but are right in front of us? Right? Again, logos, seals, the way the numbers are on the screen, the way they dictate whether you can buy food, pay rent, right? All of this operates in the same principle of intentional energy manipulation. And here's the kicker. Just like with personal sigil work, right? The person affected doesn't always have to be aware of it for it to work. This is psychology and advertising 101. The subconscious does the heavy lifting here. So if an entire population believes in the authority of money, in the necessity of debt, and the inevitability of financial struggle, those beliefs reinforce the very system that keeps people bound to it. Now, apply what you learned last week in the episode on the law of assumption. Many of us assume the necessity of debt, assume the inevitability of financial struggle. Many of us assume the authority of money. And now, again, go back to 192 on egregores. You start to see what's happening here. This all becomes some sort of invisible thought form energy ghost or some invisible control system that requires our attention and belief to exist. Now, I know some of you are thinking, wait, wasn't Babylon also a biblical thing? Yes, absolutely. And this is where the idea of Babylon as an oppressive system really takes hold. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is referred to as Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots and the abomination of earth. That's really intense language. And some interpret that as a literal reference to an ancient city, but many believe it's a symbol, right? That Babylon isn't just a place, it's a system. Also, not to make this an episode that refers to other episodes, but the mother of harlots, the whore of Babylon, is what L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons were trying to summon or manifest in the desert. So for more on the father of modern rocketry, summoning ancient harlots from beyond, see episode 190. Also, I'm not intentionally weaving all of these together. This is just how it works. When you start to dig into this stuff and zoom out, right, you see that it's all very connected. So Babylon as a system is a system of corruption, power, and deceit. And for many, that system is financial, that's just what it is. Like throughout history, people have equated Babylon with economic oppression. And when we look at it, when we look at the way money works today, credit scores, inflation, mortgages that take a lifetime to pay off, it's easy to see why people make that connection. Debt is generational now, right? Student loans, medical debt, housing costs. Many people are born into a system where they're expected to take on debt just to participate in society. That is a far cry from the idea of money as a simple exchange of value. I need beaver pelts, here's some acorns. It starts to look like a trap. So let's ask the big question again. Is the modern financial system actually Babylonian? Well, that depends on how you look at it. From a purely historical standpoint, yes. Babylon was one of the first places where structured debt and the banking systems were recorded. But if you're looking at it from a more symbolic or esoteric angle, well, the argument, it's the same argument. It's the same mechanism of control that existed in Babylon, but it exists today. So maybe this isn't Babylon's fault. Maybe Babylon was just the victim of something like human nature. I don't know. Either way, fiat currency, central banking, debt-based economies, these things do create a world where money is not just a tool for trade. It's a system that benefits those up at the top, right? While keeping the masses beneath it in a cycle of repayment. By simply being alive, we are cogs in a machine that essentially prints money and facilitates an extravagant lifestyle for these very few at the top. And even the folks at the top aren't at the top. There are other layers, I promise you. So this idea of control, it's not just some conspiracy theory. Even like these dorky mainstream economists talk about the dangers of debt-based currency and that it's creating this widening wealth gap. Well, whether or not this system is intentionally Babylonian or just evolved this way, it doesn't change the fact that most people are living within its constraints. So where does that leave us? What can we actually do? Well, first is awareness. Understanding the system is the first step of navigating it. Money itself isn't the problem. It's our relationship to it as a stimulus, as well as how it's structured and used as a tool of control, but just understand the intention and the rules of the game. Second, self-reliance. The less dependent we are on debt, the more freedom we have. That means being smart with money, questioning narratives around loans and credit, and finding a way to create value without being tied to systems that demand endless repayment. And I know that's a huge ask. It's almost impossible for some folks, right? In full disclosure, 2008 was a shit show, right? While my home loan wasn't bad, it wasn't a bad deal, all of my work evaporated overnight. I had 3 jobs and I was absolutely depressed, and that led to the short sale of my house and then filing bankruptcy. So what was interesting to me, right? What kind of shot another squirt of lighter fluid onto a fire that was already pretty hot was the fact that I was being absolutely inundated with credit card offers once my bankruptcy went through. So the game was very obvious at that point. And finally, perspective. The world has always operated on power structures, but knowing how they function gives you leverage. When you recognize the game, you can choose how to play it. It's the same thing as realizing the nature of the mind. The mind grasps and clings. Once you realize that, it doesn't just suddenly stop, but the way you relate to the mind's nature of grasping and clinging changes. It defangs the mind to a certain extent. You relate to it all differently. The world isn't going to go away. You're in the incarnation. Now work with the mind and perceive it all differently. So, what do you think? Are we living in a Babylonian financial system of control, or is it just another layer of history being repeated? Hit me up with your thoughts. I want to know what you think. Share this episode if it resonates with you, and let's keep this conversation going. Reach out, DM, email. I don't care. I love hearing from you guys. I love you. I love you. I love you. Once I found you, and this time you found me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support its creation, visit theinfinitesparkofbeing.com. There you can explore the various ways to get involved and support this work. Click the About button, read a little bit about me, and see what I have to offer you through the one-on-one sessions. Don't forget to check out the Patreon tiers, where we're building a community of everyday people with not so everyday interests. You'll also find the online apparel store. And as always, head over to the participate button and join us. Together, we're growing a community of spiritual seekers just like you.